I don't know how many of you heard, but yesterday I was reading all these stories about Finland. You know, Finland had an experiment on universal basic income. So 2 years ago, they started an experiment with 2,000 people. They basically paid 2,000 people who had no jobs. They paid them 560 euros a month without requiring them anything. They just gave them a check. And they, the idea is that if you give somebody 560 euros or $685, then they're more likely to take on more risks. They're more likely to go get a job and risk losing it because they don't have to reapply for welfare and do all of that. They just get, this is the idea of universal basic income. You just get an income no matter what your status is. So they started with jobless people, and the idea is hopefully some of these people would get a job and they would see how this affected everything else. And then they would compare these 2,000 people to 2,000 people or to other people who just get regular welfare in Finland. And yesterday, there were all these stories all over the place that Finland had decided to end the experiment, right? And as Schultz says on YouTube, Finland is Finnish land with UBI. But it turns out that was, dare I say, fake news? I don't know. Probably somebody made a mistake because I don't think it was actually fake news. I don't think anybody had an incentive to make it up. But it turns out that that's not true, at least according to reports I saw today, which say that Finland is not ending its UBI, Universal Basic Income trial, that they're actually continuing it. And they're not expanding it because expanding it would require a lot of money. And but it's keep going. So I was all ready to do a whole show on, look, it failed. Even the Finns figured out this doesn't work and this is no good. And then it turns out that it hasn't yet failed. Or now, the interesting thing about the stories yesterday that said that they had shut it down and it had failed is they gave no data. There was absolutely no data about why they were shutting it down, what had been the success or failure rate, what the results were. They said they would produce the data in 2019, which is like a year from now. So, but according to the latest, I think this is the Washington Post. Yeah, Washington Post. Finland says basic income trial going ahead as planned. That the stories yesterday saying that it was abandoned, that it had failed, that they were stopping it, were false or fake, and that it's going to go ahead. Now, this is going to become a big issue in the April 2019 elections in Finland. And the new government that's elected in 2019 will have to decide what to do with it. But as of now, breaking news, people, universal basic income trial in Finland continues unabated, and we'll have to see what happens. So I'll keep you updated on that because the whole basic income stuff I think is really interesting. And to the extent that there are trials going on in a variety of places around the world, I think there's something going on like this in Ontario, but other countries have also implemented it. It's going to be interesting because I'm interested to see what actually happens and whether one can actually conclude anything from the data. Now, morally, I find it offensive. Any redistribution of wealth is offensive, but it would be interesting to see if this has an impact on human behavior and how it changes things as well. All right, last topic I want to talk about, and then we'll call it a night, and that is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is going to announce a plan that will guarantee every American a job. How is he going to do that? Well, basically, the government will guarantee that they will employ anybody who wants a job at $15 an hour. So instead of raising the minimum wage, which is a horrible idea anyway, they are just going to create competition to private enterprise and thus drive wages up to $15. So the government will pay anybody who wants to work $15 an hour. Now, what will those people do? Well, probably dig ditches and fill them up again, but they'll be working and they'll get money and they'll be able to buy stuff with it. And since we know that the economy is driven by consumption. And we know that the value of work is the money you get for it, not the actual work that you do. This is a great plan. Now, not only is this Bernie's plan, but we now have a number of Democrats who are going to run for president in 2 years supporting this. I think Kirsten Gillibrand from New York has expressed their support, and Senator Cory Booker, 2 senators who are probably going to run for president in a Democratic ticket. You can't tell the difference anymore between Republicans and Democrats, but on the Democratic ticket in 2020 are supporting a plan like this. The idea is that this will basically be infrastructure spending, but infinite. We will spend as much as we need to guarantee that every American who wants a job gets a job at $15 an hour, whether they can do $15 an hour worth of work or not. They will take proposals from cities and towns and counties and states for infrastructure work. The government will then allocate money to that, as long as those states or cities or whatever hire people at $15 an hour, and they will approve as many projects as needed to get the unemployment rate in the United States down to 0. And the labor participation rate, the number of people actually participating in the labor force, back up to, I don't know, 70, 80, 90, maybe get everybody to work. Maybe we can have babies work as well. Old people could work. $15 an hour, I'll send my kids out to work. It's not a bad deal. Where's the money going to come from? They haven't told us yet, but they can borrow. I mean, we can borrow, right? We'll just borrow the money. Why is that a problem? I don't see why that's a problem. And why only $15 an hour? Well, $15 an hour is a good start, right? And then it'll be 30, and then one day it'll be $500 an hour. Inflation, we'll have to print money. That's okay. We'll just raise wages as inflation goes up. And how do you pay back the debt? Well, nobody pays back the debt. Nobody needs to pay back a debt. That's just ridiculous. That's just the conservative economics that nobody actually pays attention to. Look, Japan's not paying back the debt. They have 250% of GDP debt, and we're only at 100. We've got plenty of room to grow. Plus, and this is the key, right? These people will start making money, so they will start paying taxes, and they will consume more. I hope I don't have to explain why all this is nonsense, right? They will consume more, and therefore businesses will make more money, and they'll pay more taxes, and we can always raise taxes on the rich. So I don't see a problem. I think this whole revenue problem is exaggerated. It's those loony free market economists who are crazy, who think you have to, the government actually has to pay back the debt, and government actually has to have resources, have some money, before it spends it. Yeah, we're gonna do a massive infrastructure plan, bigger than even Trump wants. Trump might support this. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how Trump responds to something like this. It'll be interesting, because my guess is he'll steal it from Bernie and run with it in 2020. But yeah, this is how we're going to get all Americans back to work. We shouldn't deregulate. We don't want to cut taxes. We don't want to create economic activity where private enterprise hires them. And some people have expressed some concerns. It's kind of funny expressing some concerns. I mean, this is an absolute unmitigated disaster. This would be the end of the U.S. economy. This would make us worse than Europe. Europe doesn't have this, right? But some economists are worried because they fear that people leave their private jobs and go and work for the government. They also fear that as wages go up to 15%, that this will accelerate the use of robots, and that there will be fewer jobs, because it won't be easier. It won't become easier to start a business. It won't be easier to start a business in the private sector. So we will become more and more dependent on the government sector. So what will happen is that robots will replace people, but the private sector will not be able to adjust, will not be able to create the jobs to replace the jobs lost to the robots, so that everybody will be working for the government, and and the robots will actually be doing all the productive work. Now, this will result in ultimately in a universal basic income. So I don't know why Bernie doesn't just propose a universal basic income. It's much simpler because it'll get there much faster, much easier. But that's basically what he's proposing. Just instead of digging holes and filling them in, we won't waste the human labor. We'll just write them a check and give it to them. That, to me, is a much more rational solution. Universal basic income beats, in my view, this stupid $15 an hour guarantee wages, because at least with universal basic income, you can actually have a market elsewhere, right? Outside of, you're basically paying people a particular wage, but anything above that, they can work, they can make, they can produce, and the jobs all in the private sector. Indeed, a properly constructed universal basic income would actually result in firing hundreds of thousands of government employees, maybe millions of government employees, and in that sense would be better. So while I'm against the universal basic income, it is by far the best mechanism by which to provide welfare if it replaces every other mechanism that exists. So if you can fire all the bureaucrats and fire all the teachers and fire everybody who works for the government and replace it with a voucher system, basically, then it's an improvement over the system we have today. It's still not right. It's still not moral. It's still not where we should be, but it is an improvement. All right. So, maybe we'll take an opportunity once the complete plan is out. We'll take a few minutes to dissect it and rip it to shreds. But that just gives you a flavor of the left is going wacky left. By the way, I don't think this is electable. I don't think a plan like this. I think they're misreading the American public. I think Americans are moving to the left, but they're not moving to this left. I really think this is more of the left's impotency, which will strengthen elements on the right. I just don't see Americans voting for a plan to dig ditches at $15 an hour. But we will see. We will see.